So I am recording this because I have access to a different perspective on something I've experienced. We'll call it the retreat, the first retreat. um, it's something that it's an experience that I've come upon in my life. Um, Based on circumstances that felt random. Um, in this experience, I started out feeling victimized and confused, and also having a lot of internal guidance, um, which was really challenging to accept because there wasn't like a material, literal, this world explanation for how I arrived at retreat. Um, yeah, and I suppose I'm recording this because I want to remember the access to this perspective because I don't always have it, um, especially when I'm like up against really challenging emotions or a really heightened level of emotions that I don't feel comfortable holding, or I just have a really heightened wiring around that I need to reframe my window of tolerance for, we'll say. Okay. Lots of words, no context, just a lot of frameworks. So it feels like, let's go from there. It feels like all of these unexplainable things are happening from a logical standpoint. Um, and they're like in the literal world, in conversations with people. But while on retreat, I feel that, and this is the new perspective, I did have this like presentiment of this, but I didn't have a logical um, relationship to it because in the literal world, I didn't have language for what I was experiencing in the intangible world, in one of my domains of consciousness. Um, yeah. So ultimately, I am up against a situation that at a soul level is presenting me with opportunities to heal soul relationships or um, imprints and dynamics at an energetic level, at a soul level, that are no longer safe or serving me in this iteration of my life, in this lifetime, as well as at this stage developmentally, at this level of awareness and skill level, through my experience. So at a soul level, this is an opportunity, a retreat. In the literal world, I'm feeling all disempowered and confused, and I don't get it. It's the simplest way to say it. So I'm up against these contrasting situations, and I'm in retreat, and I am going with the flow. Like, what's the wavelengths? What's the radio station that I'm hearing, and how do I approach this circumstance and situation from that wavelength instead of letting myself get caught up in the disempowered, right? The soul level wavelength instead of the material, literal, logical. I haven't put all the pieces together kind of context. Or I don't have as many dimensions to look at this with. That's another way to approach it. So at a soul level, I got to heal relationships. And I got to experience myself as an energetic master, which is a whole other ball of wax of how uncomfortable this is to explain. But if thoughts are energy and words and actions matter and they manifest into the world, as I'm saying, energetic master is having access to radio waves and wavelengths that others may not be able to hear, sense. Most of my clair skills are claircognizance and clairsentience, and so I have a lot of access to my pre-sentiment and my precognition through those receptor muscles. If we're going to refer to something material as we're trying to think of the mind. And consciousness and the immaterial. So if my body's the antenna or the radio, the station I'm tuned to, like I can actually have access to those levels of FM or AM or whatever else kind of frequencies, nano frequencies we have access to. So I received symbols and words and ancestral connections, and I was able to, while on retreat, people I never would have had access to, never would have met, had no reason to seek out for any reason. Like we weren't on the same paths in life, obviously, in any obvious way. There was no obvious connection. So these people I would not have associated or linked myself in connection with on any kind of level of consciousness or realm or awareness. There is some kind of soul or energetic tie, bond, knowing, relationship, awareness, needing access to, needing some kind of introduction to connection. And I am doing Reiki healing, and then I'm using my own access to symbols. I am speaking words and mantras in a very simplistic way. It's like living poetically all of a sudden in this space where there were no pretenses, I would say, that I needed to uphold in myself, because I didn't have any agenda. I just was in this whirlwind of my own experience, and navigating and understanding. And I am aware that this doesn't feel, it feels very mine, like it feels very mine as I just know it, claircognizance, and I just feel it, and it's like a muscle memory. But I have no cognitive access to what this means, like logical, prefrontal cortex access to this automatic knowing. But I just know that it's safe, and I know that I feel very present with myself. I feel in stasis. I'd been doing a lot of work well before this on connecting to my highest self, my most connected self. Who am I? What do I really believe? How do I belong? All of those big existential questions. And so I was very much in this exercise of, what does this all mean? What's the lesson here? this feels like a roller coaster ride because I'm resistant to it internally, but and mostly not just like opening my window of tolerance to my own power, um, cognitive prowess, um, ancestral DNA level skill, and trying to have language, and so I feel discombobulated. But I'm aware that throughout this whole process, like this isn't about me, and this isn't about now only. And so I start as an energy master, stepping into that identity of an energy master. I start just letting this stuff flow, and I start providing individuals with individual symbols, not Reiki symbols, but just their own ancestral, galactic, and even the language, it felt foreign to me, but their own, from a conscious level, but very muscle memory otherwise. But yeah, their galactic roots, their life tracks, objectives, their sovereignty, their divinity, like their own. It wasn't mine, it wasn't anybody else's. The way Reiki, you learn the masters that understood this wisdom, their methodology and their perspective and their teaching, and how to channel and how to call it in, and you're attuned to that. I've now had practice in channeling with people who are in coma and still living, and then having access visually to light, and then physically to that claircognizance, that knowing that it was this being that I had supported in life's energy, and that they had a message, and that there were like wonky technological glitches where like phone calls showed up for people from telephones for deceased persons that weren't were in my physical world, but they weren't my story. And so getting that kind of external confirmation of these felt sense knowings, and so it's like I was honoring the experiences without needing, and honoring the muscle memory in my DNA, in my ancestral wisdom, in my environmental access to wisdom, but honoring that without letting the lack of, oh, I can't spell it out, ABC, this is what's happening, checklist, here's the biomarkers, here's the energy flow through the somatic body, like without needing that explanation, but just knowing and allowing that genius basically to flow, that type of access and connection to flow. And I was surprised. I felt surprised by, it's like I was doing it and I was observing it in this at the same time, so I got to be in the feeling of awe, and also in that autopilot flow. I'm just walking, I'm just breathing kind of feeling. It's just a Tuesday morning, it's just a Friday afternoon, it's just a Saturday morning, like just, this is just life kind of felt sense. And really embodying and seeing myself and witnessing myself as an energy master. Not just somebody that requires an external endowment of that title, but actually somebody who's invested the time in building the skill and observing self in use of that skill and observing feedback in the internal world as well as in the external material world, and observing the language and the technologies that present themselves and the synchronicities in the literal world. So, wow, that was big. So it's been a journey. And I feel even lightheaded right now. But it's like almost like making it through that first part of the roller coaster ride where you're slightly overwhelmed. You were expecting it, you're on board with it, but at the same time, you're feeling slightly overwhelmed by the whole thing, and you're not all the way in your body. You're kind of tense or resisting it, but now you still feel all of the changes in the ride and the up and down in your system kind of being behind the motion and in the flow, and now you're actually enjoying it. It was a different opportunity that I wouldn't have had things just gone exactly as I wanted them to. I would have done these things, but I would have attributed it to a conscious skill. I wouldn't have discovered the somatic gold mine that is already within. I would have attributed it to that course or that training or that attunement or that workshop or that podcast. And I wouldn't have had a first-hand evidentiary, experiential, tangible, whoa, this thing really happened like this experience. And to give you an example of how I felt about being at this particular style of retreat with this particular group of individuals, it's like going to watch willingly a show that you've always criticized and never thought was of high caliber or value add, and now being amongst the cult following of this style of show, if you will, and then being expected to just be there and experience this reality and this perspective for what it was. And it wasn't a cult, but the frameworks and the structures and the organizations behind this type, it's like going to anger management when you identify as the most optimistic, pleasant person under the sun. And being told you're angry and frustrated, and you're like, but I don't identify as that. So it's like not being able to see parallels in this experience with this particular collective of individuals. Like, I would be fine studying anger management from the standpoint of training others who are angry, but I'm not angry. And it wasn't an anger management retreat, by the way. It's just that's the only way I can think to simile or paint a picture to something like what I would have felt, how I really felt about it, as an example. Whew. So here I am. I had started the process of getting the credentials and have that external appointment of Reiki master, and maybe this is at a soul level part of that attunement. Like, I wasn't supposed to go the traditional path, but I was supposed to start to experience what the framework of going down that path looks like, for various reasons, for knowledge, for data. So, yeah. I wasn't relating to it very well, but I wanted to relate to it at a soul level and from a lesson perspective. Okay, so moving on to these attunements and these symbols and numbers and just knowing and being given insight into what people need, because not all of this is mine, just knowing or connection making, but it's also channeling ancestral wisdom, tuning into other people's biosphere energetically and physically because I'm in their presence, and being able to attune to whatever energetic force is supporting them and giving them their own symbols, their own activation. And I don't get to see what any of it is used for, and I don't get to see any of the outcomes, and I don't get to get any feedback about how they experienced it. Like, I don't. I just had to release it and put it out there and express it and do it and be it. And that was something else. I don't recommend this path to anyone just because there's a lot of density energetically and emotionally to it at arriving at this path from my perspective. But I mean, some of us came here for that, so you'll arrive at it and then you'll call it a retreat. You'll know what I'm talking about. Basically. But all the answers are available in the general archive of consciousness. So if you really want to know, ask yourself what this is in reference to and why I've chosen to articulate it and communicate it at this, with this particular curation of words. Examples and expressions. Okay, that's what was bubbling in my mind, in my heart, so that I can look at this later. And I also want to take note of what I'm pondering next and what I'm working artistically, not just from the canvas, acrylic on and mineral paint on canvas artistic perspective, but also from the artistic perspective on the art of living, and communicating. Okay, we know what mind is, we know what body is, but what is the soul element to that, and what does that mean? What's the electromagnetic signature? What's the biosphere? What does that all mean at an energetic level? And what does it mean at a physiological level? And how does our biology play into that? How do our genetics and epigenetics play into that? All of those ponderings. And then giving like visual tools and spoken expressions to accessing these perspectives, or kind of modeling what they might look like a tool for conversation in the physical world. So yeah, those are the projects I've committed my energy to in the next little while, and so I know I'm going to be at a heightened awareness. I do want to talk about this retreat experience from the standpoint of things we resist, and can lean into from a soul lesson plan perspective on this roller coaster of life, or this playground of life. However you've chosen to play with your mental setting, your mindset, your virtual playground as you move through the world, through words, through language, through frameworks and structures. Okay, that's all for today, and I hope this added some point of interest, inspired some curiosity, and definitely invited you to feel, think, and emote deeply. All right, all.